beef blood dripping on other food, freezer burn that would make an icicle look tasty, and thawing meat like a novice. These are a few things to avoid doing when freezing ground beef. One of the biggest mistakes you could be making when freezing ground beef is not having a freezer that is maintaining the correct temperature. According to the USDA, a temperature of 0 degrees Fahrenheit will prevent microbial growth in meat, allowing ground beef to be stored for long periods. As the temperature of ground beef rises above 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it becomes fertile ground for microorganisms. Because maintaining a safe temperature is so critical, it is a good idea to keep a freezer thermometer in your freezer and periodically check it to ensure the temperature is not rising above 0 degrees Fahrenheit. If your freezer is not able to maintain this critical temperature, it could be due to several different reasons. The first thing to check is if your freezer door is remaining ajar or not staying closed. You should also check to see if the contents of your freezer are blocking the air circulating fan. It's also possible your freezer has a mechanical malfunction. If you suspect this is the case, you should call a repair professional. Maintaining the temperature of your freezer is also an issue during power outages. The Department of Energy notes a freezer should be able to keep ground beef safe for 48 hours as long as the door is kept closed to retain the cold air. Once the temperature of the freezer reaches 40 degrees Fahrenheit, ground beef will only last for 2 hours before it is unsafe to eat. Arguably, the biggest concern when it comes to freezing ground beef is avoiding freezer burn. The process that causes freezer burn starts when thousands of ice crystals form as food is frozen. Over time, these frozen water molecules move from the frozen piece of food to a colder part of the freezer, typically the side. As frozen water molecules are lost, the food becomes dehydrated, resulting in freezer burn. One method to prevent freezer-burned ground beef is to keep those frozen water molecules contained with tight packaging. Start by wrapping your ground beef in plastic wrap. Next, wrap it with aluminum foil. Finally, put the wrapped ground beef in a plastic bag. Another effective way to prevent air exposure is to use a vacuum sealer. According to Pack Food, its vacuum seal system can keep ground meat fresh for 1 year and non-ground for longer, while Food Saver says its vacuum seal system can keep meat fresh for 2 to 3 years, about 2 to 4 times longer than ordinary storage methods. Because the quality of frozen ground beef can deteriorate after a couple of months, you should plan accordingly. If you are buying ground beef in bulk and freezing it, only buy enough meat you think you can consume within 3 or 4 months. While you can safely consume meat that has been frozen for more than 4 months, the quality of ground beef will deteriorate the longer you wait. You can also avoid keeping ground beef frozen for too long by using a first-in, first-out system, as noted by Gordon Food Service. Start by making sure all of your frozen ground beef is labeled with the date on which it was frozen. Move the most recently frozen packages to the rear of your refrigerator and place the oldest packages toward the front. Use frozen beef from the front of the freezer and work your way backward. Maintain this chronological rotation as you use frozen beef and add fresh beef to your freezer. Regularly inspect dates and throw out older frozen beef if it is covered in ice crystals or appears discolored. There is a myth about a refrigerator not capable of safely cooling food that's too warm. Although this myth isn't true, you should stop putting hot food directly into a freezer. If you place freshly cooked hot food, including ground beef, into a freezer, it could cause other foods in the freezer to defrost, potentially allowing microorganisms to proliferate. Hot food also takes longer to freeze, and this could mean a food item spends too much time at temperatures that are hospitable to bacteria, which is 40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit according to the FDA. The proper way to freeze cooked ground beef is to cool it slowly. Start by allowing your cooked beef to come down from its cooking temperature so that it can safely be placed in a container. Then place it in the refrigerator. After the beef has cooled in the refrigerator, tightly wrap it and place it into freezer bags. Label the bags to ensure your cooked beef does not remain in the freezer for too long. The recommended method for thawing raw meat is to allow it to slowly defrost in the refrigerator over the course of 24 hours. You should also place your defrosting meat on a large sheet pan or plate that can catch any potential leaks of raw meat juices. This plate or pan should then be placed at the bottom of the refrigerator in case it happens to overflow. While this process is largely foolproof, Sometimes we forget to pull frozen meat out of the freezer one day in advance. In these situations, it may be tempting to skip the recommended method and completely defrost frozen ground beef at room temperature. However, this is one of the biggest mistakes people make when defrosting meat. A refrigerator keeps defrosting meat outside the dangerous temperature zone that facilitates bacterial growth, which ranges from 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. According to the National Agriculture Library, it is safe to jumpstart your defrost at room temperature, but you should only do so for less than 2 hours. After 2 hours, you should move your defrosting meat to the refrigerator to complete the process. There's nothing disastrous about freezing multiple pounds of ground beef as a single block, but unless you're cooking it all at once, safely defrosting the amount you need will be very tricky. A simple, elegant solution to this is pre-portioning your ground beef before cooking it. According to Weight Watchers, the ideal serving size for cooked meat is 3 ounces. Because ground beef loses about 25% of its weight during cooking, each freezer-bound portion should be 4 ounces. For meal prep purposes, simply multiply 4 ounces of raw meat per the number of people in your household. Someone prepping for a household of 3, for instance, should measure out 12-ounce portions. Lifehacker offers a clever hack for creating multiple individual portions in the same large freezer bag. Start by portioning out a dinner's worth of ground beef, such as 12 ounces for a 3-person household. Next, flatten out the ground beef. You can even make them into burger patties. The flattened portions or patties will defrost much quicker and are less likely to contain air pockets, which can facilitate freezer burn.
Hamburgers, the cornerstone of any nutritious breakfast.
Be sure to tightly seal and mark your freezer bag. Since this process doesn't involve tightly wrapping the ground beef, it's best for short-term freezing. One of the biggest concerns related to storing raw meat is cross-contamination. If blood from your raw meat drips onto other food products like ice cream containers or popsicles, there is a risk that any pathogens in the blood will multiply in them. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, raw ground beef can harbor tons of bacteria. Hence, any juices from raw meat can carry these pathogens. Furthermore, any containers that have not been properly cleaned can pass residual bacteria along if used to store raw meat. In significant quantities, these bacteria can cause severe illness and even death.
It's food poisoning. I have it too. I did not sleep for 1 second last night, and I cracked the bottom of the toilet bowl.
Restaurants prevent cross-contamination by organizing and keeping raw meat in either its original package or clean, sanitized containers that prevent leakage. You also shouldn't store raw and cooked foods together, even in your freezer. Store raw ground beef at the bottom of your freezer. If for some reason any liquid leaks out, it won't drip onto other foods. Freezing cooked ground beef is a great technique for weekly meal prep. It's important to note that one of the common mistakes everyone makes with meal prep is batch cooking just one dish. To avoid this mistake, you should either cook several dishes at once or cook your ground beef so that it can be used in several different ways. For example, if you cook ground beef with just salt, black pepper, and onions, it could be used to make tacos one night and stir-fry the next night. After cooking your ground beef for different dishes or with generic seasoning, allow it to cool, first on a counter for about 20 minutes and then in a refrigerator. Once the cooked ground beef has reached refrigerator temperature, it should be wrapped tightly and transferred to freezer bags. When you're ready to use your ground beef, simply thaw it in your refrigerator and reheat it. When cooking with ground beef, a key part of the preparation is allowing the meat to warm up slightly at room temperature so that you aren't throwing cold meat into a pan. Getting a good sear on your meat helps to develop a lot of flavors, and when you add cold meat to a hot pan, it's difficult to get a good sear. Additionally, adding a lot of cold meat to a pan can significantly bring down the temperature of the pan, potentially throwing off your cooking process. If you're cooking burgers, cooking them cold also makes it more difficult to ensure the inside is cooked properly. You also don't want to cook room temperature ground beef. Not only are you running the risk of food poisoning, but you are also increasing the chances of overcooking your meat and drying it out. Celebrity chef Bobby Flay recommends leaving a steak on the counter for 20 minutes before cooking it, and this also works for cooking ground beef.
That's good advice.